The following is intended for informational purposes only. It is intended to supplement classroom training and documentation. It should not be relied on as a replacement or substitute for classroom training with a live expert instructor. Welcome to Lesson 3, Generating and Updating a Form Type. Here we're going to show you that once you've completed your form type, you need to actually generate it and get it ready so that you can be used as an active form. And there are a few different steps that you need to go through in order for that to happen. And then how do we deal with subsequent updates to a form once the form has already been used? At the end of this lesson, you will have and see how we can use a simple personal details form that which we configured in the lesson 2, and here we'll be able to actually use it now that it's now become active. You'll see the 5 fields. Now, at the moment, I haven't created the underlying form yet. And when I click generate, this is when the actual form will be created. So I'm going to generate the form, and you'll see what happens. Get a warning saying that I need to give access to my application service to the user group. A new user group application service is created, a CM application service, and a new business object based upon the form lines that I just created. And now I'm going to have to click OK, and you'll see that the status will change to generated, and we will now have an underlying form. We now have the related BO, which was now generated based upon our form lines that we defined and sections we defined earlier. And we can even see directly what this particular form is going to look like. It doesn't show it properly at the moment. It just have a main section. I don't see everything. Show all. I now see some of it, although not perfectly. And the reason for this is because even though we've generated it, we need to always, after generating, we need to flush the system. Very important to remember to flush the flush all command after generating a form every single time that you do so. So if I now go flush all, and then I will see whether I will be able to see the form I just created properly. Take a few seconds to refresh over here. Now, let me go back to my form that we just created. If I go now, view display, hopefully I actually see it correctly. See now I see personal details, and I see my title, and I see what I've created. Now this form is not yet available for me to use. Its status is still in generated. It's not active, and I have to activate it. So I activate the form. So even though I have actually activated this form, I still can't use it yet. And the reason is because I need to add my application service to the user group. So I need to go to application security. And I go down here and I'm going to grant access to the all services user group, which I am part of, my user is part of. And in order to add on all the access modes, I'm just going to do a little trick of deleting it, adding it back in, so the access modes can be seen. And I'm going to save that. And once I've done that, I should be able to use this newly generated form. There's my form. It has now a main section where the receive date happens to be the one field I have to fill in. And this is the section I created, personal details. It has a title with a drop down and the other fields as I expected, an ID type, and I can save the form. And the form is saved. We could carry on and actually go through the life cycle of the form, and you will see that this particular form will do nothing at the moment because we've actually haven't done anything except for create the format of the form, but none of the logic needed or the form rules in order to actually do something with this form. So the first stage, though, is complete. We have shown how you can add and change a particular user interface using the form sections in line. Now, last thing before we end this part, if you now have created this form, but now you want to make a change to this particular form type, you will find that you cannot do so because I already have a form associated with the form type, and it won't allow you to change the user interface anymore. Meaning, if I go to the form type here, and I say, okay, let me make changes. And in order to actually make changes, you will see that you can't make changes in this state of active. If I try to go to my sections and lines, it's read-only, but I can't actually change anything. And you'll see that the only way to make a change is if I, example, if I go to the title, although it says over here that I should be able to edit, you will see that I'm unable to do so. It has to be in pending in order, or error. Now, in order for me to actually use it, therefore, I need to move it back to pending. If I try to move it back to pending, the form type will complain. It will say that existing forms already exist. So I am unable to do anything here. So I have two options if I want to make changes. I can either duplicate this form and create a new form type, and it will copy over also the existing fields, sections and lines that I've created, and then you would have to regenerate the form again. The other option I have is to use the database and delete the form from the system. Something which you would perhaps do obviously only do in a development environment. So my two options are either to use a duplicate, and then I can duplicate this form, and I can say choose to copy sections and lines as well, and then I can carry on with my new form and make changes. Or I can create a script in something like SQL, which I've done over here, to delete all forms of a particular type. And once those forms are deleted, I should be able to move my form back to pending. So in this example, if I use this particular script and I take this form type, I could run this. First of all, I have to connect to the database. Copy in. And then I've actually now be able to, I deleted the form, I can move this back to pending. And now that I've moved it back to pending, I could make the changes I want to the sections and lines. So what have we learned in this lesson? We've spoken mainly about how you generate the form type, and the generation of the form type is what creates the underlying form BO. The whole beauty of the form type is that you do not actually have to go in to create your underlying form BO. It's the form type itself that creates it, and it's the generation which does that. When you hit the generation button, that's when the underlying form BO, the user interface for the form BO, and all the logic around the user interface that is created. We have seen that in order to use a form type, to create a form of that form type, it must be in the state of active, and it's not sufficient just to be active. The user group who is using the system, the user who's inside the user group, must have access to that application service, must have rights to the application service in order to be able to see that form type. We have also seen that a form type can only be updated if it's in pending. So if you need to make changes to the sections and lines, you must move it back to the pending state. Once you've already created forms for a particular form type, then you will be unable to actually then make changes to the underlying form, which creates a problem as to what happens if you need to make new sections or lines to the form. And the answer to that is one of two options. One is to actually duplicate the form type, and you can duplicate both the sections and lines. The problem with that is that you'll have to regenerate and add the application service to the user group again, which is a little frustrating. However, that's what you'll need to do. And you would have to also add in, although we haven't dealt with form rules, you would have to add in the form rules again, because duplicating a form type does not add in the form rules by itself. The other option, if you're working with a development environment where you can have access to the underlying database, you could create a script which deletes all the forms associated with that form type from the system. And that once you've done that, you will be able to then move the form type back into pending.